The Fall of the House of Usher, adapted from the story by Edgar Allan Poe. Page 150. A letter arrived from my boyhood friend Roderick Usher. He begged me to come visit him at his family house. Usher said that he was ill in both his body and mind. I could tell from his words that he was not well. "You are my best and only friend," Usher wrote. "Perhaps you can ease my suffering by coming to stay with me for a few weeks." Usher's words disturbed me, because even though we had been companions since childhood, there was always a side of him I felt I didn't know, and I had heard many rumors about his strange family. Yet as his friend, I felt obliged to obey his request. I set out for Usher's house on a gloomy autumn day. As I came upon the ancient mansion, I sensed an atmosphere of decay. The stone walls of the house were crumbling, and the windows stared down at me like vacant eyes. Surrounding the house were dead bushes, rotting tree trunks, and a dark moat filled with sluggish water. My eyes fixed on a long crack that zigzagged down the front of the house like an open wound. The place was more than depressing. It was terrifying. A deep sense of despair crept over me. The house had been in Usher's family for hundreds of years. The family was known for their artistic and musical talents, but there was something peculiar about them. Not one member of the family ever moved out of the house of Usher. Generation after generation of Ushers had lived and died there. Reluctantly, I urged my horse forward across the creaky bridge that spanned the moat. For a moment, I imagined that I was crossing into hell. A servant gestured me inside the mansion, then led me down dark passages and up a staircase cloaked in shadows. Finally, I arrived at Usher's room. Inside the room, the narrow, pointed windows were covered with blood-red draperies. The furniture was in tatters. Roderick Usher rose from a sofa to greet me. Pages 152 and 153. I couldn't believe my eyes as I gazed upon his face. My old friend was terribly altered from when I had last seen him. His eyes were watery and strangely enlarged. His lips seemed drained of color. His skin was as pale as a ghost's, and his hair floated wildly above his face. Yet when Usher greeted me, he reminded me of exactly how he had been as a boy. "So good to see you, friend. I'm very grateful that you came," Usher said. His words were warm and polite, yet his voice betrayed a nervous agitation. Immediately, I asked him what the trouble was. "I'm suffering from an evil family mental disease," he said. "I will perish from it, I know. My physicians say there is no cure." I asked him to describe the symptoms of the disease. "I can barely eat," Usher said, "and I am fearful of straying away from the house. Sudden lights and noises disturb me. Everything, it seems, fills me with an overwhelming terror." "What can I do to help you?" I asked. Sit. Make yourself comfortable," said Usher. But comfort was not possible in that house. The sudden gusts of wind that blew through its shadowy walls sent a chill down my spine and through my heart. Usher continued his story. He had not left the old mansion for many years because its gloom had influenced his mind, filling him with anxiety. Much of that anxiety was for his beloved sister Madeline. She was his only living relative, but she too was afflicted by a peculiar disease. "Her body and mind are wasting away," he explained. "If she died, I would be the last of the ancient race of Ushers." As he spoke, I sensed a presence in the room. I glanced around and saw Madeline passing through the shadows. She disappeared into the darkness without speaking a word. Usher buried his face in his hands and cried. "That will probably be the last time we see her alive," he said tragically. I decided not to mention her name again. This house and its inhabitants was beginning to play on my nerves. For the next several days, I did everything in my power to lift Usher's spirits. We painted, read books, and I listened to him play melancholy music on his guitar, but never did we mention Madeline's name. Pages 154 and 155. For a while, I imagined that the gloom hanging over the house of Usher might lift, but I was wrong. Things were about to get much worse. Usher's thoughts were growing more and more bizarre. One day he turned to me and asked, "Do you think the stone walls of this house are alive?" I hesitated to answer and stared at his wild eyes. "They are alive," he said. "Look how each stone is arranged in the wall like members of a family. These stones are alive indeed, unlike the Lady Madeline, who is no more." My heart froze, and I took a deep breath. Now Roderick Usher was the last of his family. That evening, Usher asked me to help prepare his sister for burial in the family vault. Together we laid her wasted away body in an iron casket. Then we carried the casket down to the vault, which lay deep under the house in a shadowy dungeon. This dungeon was right below the bedroom where I was sleeping. Before sliding the casket lid shut, I glanced at Madeline. There was a great resemblance to her brother. "We were twins," Usher whispered tragically. I couldn't bear to look at this dead woman any longer. I was filled with emotion as we screwed the tight lid of the casket. Then we shut the iron door of the vault, which made a sharp grating sound as it closed. After 7 nights had passed, Usher's illness grew even worse. I would encounter him roaming about the house with no purpose, and he would sit slumped in his chair staring for hours at nothing. On the 8th night, a violent storm began to gather, and I could not sleep. I began to tremble from a sense of horror I had never felt before. Then I heard a light step on the stairs. It was Usher, carrying a lantern. "Have you not seen it?" he asked. His eyes looked half insane. "Stay, stay, you will see it." He flung open the window, and the fury of the storm burst in, nearly lifting us off our feet. "Leave it closed," I cried, and slammed the window shut. Pages 156 and 157. Usher and I sat down, exhausted with emotion. I decided we should read a story out loud to help calm us down. I began to read, but paused when I heard something rattle. "It's just the wind," I told myself. I continued to read. Then I heard the peculiar rattle again, followed by a sharp, grating, screaming sound from below us, from the dungeon. Usher was facing away from me. Did he hear what I was hearing? I attempted to continue reading, but the clanging and the screaming grew ever worse. Completely unnerved, I leapt to my feet and rushed to my friend's chair. I tapped on his shoulder, and when he turned to me, I saw a sickly smile quivering from his lips. "Yes, I hear it," he uttered. He almost seemed to be speaking to himself. "I hear it, and I have heard it. For many long, long hours, even for many days. Is she alive? Did we seal her in the casket while living? Oh, where will I escape? Is she coming? Are those her footsteps? Is that her heartbeat? Madman!" Below us, a sharp, grating noise sounded as though a casket was removing itself from its place in the vault. Usher cried out, I don't know who is alive in this house and who is dead. Look, there she is!" Suddenly a strong gust of wind blew open the window and threw Usher to the floor. Outside, the figure of Madeline seemed to hover like a ghost. Then, with a low moan, Madeline's pale, blood-stained form fell upon her brother and bore him to the floor, a corpse. I fled that house in terror and panic. The storm had grown in intensity, and for an instant the night flashed bright with lightning. I looked up and saw that the moon was blood red. I ran across the bridge and then looked back. At that moment, I saw the walls of the mansion split along the zigzag crack. Then the dark waters of the moat swallowed up the stones of the house of Usher.